I watched my sister-in-law's perfectly manicured hand slide the contract across the mahogany table, her smile sharp enough to cut glass. "Just sign here, Emma," Victoria purred, tapping a blood-red nail on the dotted line. It's what David would have wanted. My dead husband's name in her mouth made my stomach turn, but I kept my face neutral. Grief-stricken, broken, exactly what they expected to see. The contract was for the rights to the Moonstone Chronicles, my fantasy series that had defined a generation. 5 books, a cultural phenomenon, and in my first life, I'd signed away the royalties to the Hayes Family Trust at this exact meeting, 3 months after David's funeral. That was 23 years ago. I died at 51, penniless and alone in a studio apartment, while the Hayes family lived in mansions built on my words. Victoria had been particularly cruel at the end, sending me a photo of her daughter's wedding, held at a venue that cost more than I'd earned in a decade, all funded by my books. Then I woke up at 28, 3 days after David's car accident, with 23 years of memories burning in my skull like acid. "Emma?" Victoria's voice dripped with false concern. "Are you all right? I know this must be so difficult." Difficult. She had no idea. I picked up the pen, and I saw her eyes gleam with victory. Across the table, David's brother Marcus cleared his throat. "Emma, you don't have to do this now. Take your time." He almost sounded sincere. In my first life, I'd believed he was the good one, the kind brother-in-law who'd tried to help. I'd learned the truth too late. He'd been skimming money from the royalties for years, using it to fund his venture capital firm while sending me condolence checks that barely covered my rent. "No," I said softly, my voice trembling just right. David always said family takes care of family. He'd want me to do this. The lie tasted bitter, but necessary. David had said those words. Sure, usually right before asking me to work through the night while he went out drinking with his college buddies. Right before telling me my writing was cute, but he was the real breadwinner with his middle management job. Right before the life insurance policy, I didn't know he'd changed, removing me as beneficiary and naming his mother instead. I signed my name on the contract, and Victoria actually clapped her hands together. "Oh, Emma, you're doing the right thing. We'll make sure the Hayes legacy lives on through your little books." Little Books, the series that had sold 40 million copies worldwide. The series that would spawn movies, merchandise, theme park attractions. The series that, in my original timeline, had made the Hayes family a fortune estimated at over $300 million. But here's what Victoria didn't know. What none of them knew. Because they'd never actually read the contracts they'd had their lawyers draw up. Copyright law in the United States has a fascinating provision. For works created after 1978, the author or their heirs can terminate any transfer of rights after 35 years. The Moonstone Chronicles had been published starting in 2012. It was now 2015. In exactly 35 years, 27, the rights would automatically revert to me. Not to the Hayes Family Trust, not to whatever corporate entity they sold them to me. And in my first life, I died in 2038. 9 years before that reversion. The Hayes family had kept the rights, kept the money, kept everything. But now I had time. "Thank you," I whispered, letting a single tear roll down my cheek. "Thank you for helping me honor David's memory." Victoria stood up, smoothing her designer skirt. "Of course, dear. That's what family does. Now, Marcus and I have been discussing the future of the franchise. We think it's time to sell the rights to Streamflix. They're offering $75 million for the adaptation rights." My heart jumped, but I kept my face blank. In my first life, they'd made that sale in 2018 for $50 million. They were moving faster now, probably because my grief was making me more pliable. "Whatever you think is best," I said. "Perfect. We'll handle all the negotiations. You just focus on healing." She paused at the door. "Oh, and Emma, the house. David's name was on the deed, and with the debts from the accident—" "I understand," I said quietly. "I'll start looking for somewhere smaller." She smiled, satisfied. "I'm so glad you're being reasonable about this. Some widows can be so difficult." The door clicked shut behind them, and I waited exactly 5 minutes before I let the smile spread across my face. Let them have it. Let them have everything: the house, the contracts, the immediate profits. Let them build their empire on what they thought was their victory. Because I had something they didn't: knowledge. I knew that in 2019, the Moonstone Chronicles would experience a massive resurgence when a famous actress tweeted about rereading the series during a depression. That tweet would spark a global reread campaign. I knew that in 2024, a YouTube channel called Fantasy Explained would create a series of videos analyzing the magic system in the books. Those videos would go viral, introducing the series to Gen Z, creating a whole new fan base. I knew that in 2031, a deepfake scandal would hit Streamflix's adaptation so hard that they'd cancel it. But by then, the brand would be so strong that another studio, Nexus Films, would pick it up for double the price. I knew that in 2042, the original books would be taught in high schools and colleges as examples of pioneering feminist fantasy, creating an academic cottage industry of critical analysis. And I knew that in 2047, when the rights reverted to me, the franchise would be worth not $300 million, but over $1 billion. All I had to do was survive. All I had to do was let them think they'd won. All I had to do was wait. The first year was the hardest. I moved into a one-bedroom apartment in a neighborhood Victoria would have called ethnic, which meant it was actually diverse and affordable. I got a job at a bookstore, not for the money, though I needed it, but for the connections. The owner, Marcus Chen, no relation to my brother-in-law, was a science fiction author who'd never quite hit it big. In my first life, I'd never met him. In this life, I made sure to befriend him. "You're Emma Hayes?" he said when I applied, his eyes widening. "The Emma Hayes? Moonstone Chronicles, Emma Hayes?" "Was," I said with a sad smile. "I signed over the rights, family issues." He winced. "Shit. I'm sorry, but hey, you can still write, right? Nothing stops you from creating new work." "Maybe," I said non-committally, but I didn't write. Not yet. Because I remembered what had happened in my first life when I'd tried to publish something new. I'd written The Crimson. Crown a standalone fantasy novel in 2010, it had been good, maybe better than Moonstone. But Victoria had used the Hayes family lawyers to tie me up in legal battles, claiming that since I'd written it while under their care after David's death, and since it shared thematic elements with Moonstone, it was derivative work that belonged to the Hayes estate. I'd fought for 2 years and lost everything. The legal fees had bankrupted me, and the book had never been published. So this time, I didn't write. I worked, I watched, I waited. And I documented everything. Every meeting with Victoria where she updated me on the franchise. Every condescending email from Marcus about how they were protecting David's legacy. Every check they sent me, exactly $2,000 a month, pulled from surplus royalties that amounted to less than 0.1% of what the books were actually earning. I kept every scrap of paper, every digital record, every voice message where Victoria's tone dripped with barely concealed contempt. In my first life, I'd been isolated, ashamed. I'd believed their narrative that I was lucky they were taking care of me, that I was too fragile to handle business matters, that I should be grateful for whatever scraps they threw my way. This time, I knew better. This time, I built a different kind of foundation. The Streamflix deal closed in 2010, and Victoria threw a party to celebrate. I wasn't invited, but Marcus Chen showed me the photos on social media. Champagne towers, celebrity guests, Victoria in a dress that cost more than my annual salary. The caption on her Instagram, celebrating the legacy of the Hayes family's literary empire. My late brother David would be so proud. #Moonstone Chronicles #family first. She'd cropped me out of the family photos completely. Marcus Chen made a disgusted sound. You know what the worst part is? People believe this shit. They think the Hayes family created Moonstone. Most people don't pay attention to author names, I said quietly. They just consume the content. Doesn't make it right. No, I agreed. It doesn't. He looked at me thoughtfully. You ever think about fighting back? Every day. But they have money and lawyers and time. I'm just trying to survive. It was what he expected to hear. The truth was more complicated. I was trying to survive, yes, but I was also building something they couldn't see. A network, resources, a completely separate life that had nothing to do with Emma Hayes, widow and victim. I'd started taking classes at the community college under my maiden name, Emma Winters. Business law, contract law, intellectual property law. The professors had no idea who I was, and I intended to keep it that way. I'd also started seeing a therapist. Dr. Sarah Kim was in her 60s, sharp as a blade, and she'd been through her own legal battles with a publisher who'd tried to steal her psychology research. The thing about narcissists, she told me during one session, is that they can't imagine anyone being smarter than them. They see what they want to see. If you show them weakness, they'll believe it, because it confirms their worldview. So I should keep pretending to be broken? I'm not saying that. I'm saying you should protect yourself. If these people are as dangerous as you say, they are. Then you need to be strategic. There's no shame in tactical retreat. I thought about that a lot. Tactical retreat. It sounded so much better than giving up or letting them win. Because I wasn't giving up. I was positioning myself. And in 2019, my positioning started to pay off. The tweet came from Melissa Thorne, an Oscar-winning actress known for taking complicated, emotionally raw roles. She'd just finished filming a brutal drama about addiction, and she posted a photo of the Moonstone Chronicles with the caption, "Getting through the hard days by revisiting the books that saved me. As a teen, Emma Hayes understood something about surviving darkness that I'm only now beginning to grasp. These books are medicine." It had 500,000 likes in 6 hours. By the end of the week, the Moonstone Chronicles was trending on every platform. Book sales spiked by 800%. Fan art flooded social media. Someone started a hashtag Moonstone Saved Me, and suddenly thousands of people were sharing stories about how the books had helped them through depression, anxiety, abuse, loss. Victoria's phone started ringing off the hook with interview requests, talk show appearances, book club features. She called me, for the first time in months, her voice honey-sweet. "Emma, have you seen what's happening? It's incredible. We need to coordinate our message." "Our message?" I kept my voice small, confused. "Well, yes, you're the author, obviously, but the Hayes family has been stewarding this legacy. We need to present a unified front." "What do you want me to do?" "Just follow our lead. Marcus has been handling the press releases. We don't want mixed messages confusing people." "Mixed messages?" "Right." What she meant was, don't remind people that you exist. Don't remind them that you wrote these books. Don't remind them that you're not actually part of the Hayes family empire. "Okay," I said meekly. "Whatever you think is best." "Perfect. Oh, and Emma, we're increasing your monthly payment to $2,500. "See? We take care of our own." A $500 raise while they were pulling in millions from the renewed sales. I thanked her profusely and hung up. Then I called my lawyer. Not the Hayes family lawyer. My lawyer. The one I'd hired 6 months ago, using money I'd saved from my bookstore job and from selling my grandmother's jewelry. Jewelry David had never known about. Jennifer Torres was young, hungry, and she'd grown up reading the Moonstone Chronicles. When I'd first approached her, she'd nearly cried. "I can't believe Emma Hayes is sitting in my office," she'd said. "I can't pay you much," I'd warned her. "I don't care. What they did to you? It's wrong. I'll work pro bono if I have to." She hadn't had to. I'd scraped together a retainer, and she'd started quietly building a case. Not to fight them now, but to prepare for later. "The resurgence is good for us," Jennifer said when I called. "It establishes the ongoing value of your work, independent of anything the Hayes family has done. The more successful the books are based purely on their own merit, the stronger our position when the rights revert." 28 years is a long time to wait. It is. But we're not just waiting. We're building a documented pattern of exploitation. Every email where they condescend to you, every payment that's far below fair value, every public appearance where they take credit for the Hayes legacy while erasing you. "You really think this will work?" Her smile was fierce. "Emma, in 28 years, you're going to be 56 years old. You're going to own the most valuable fantasy franchise in the world. And the Hayes family is going to have nothing. Yes, I think this will work." I wanted to believe her. Some days I did. Other days, I woke up from nightmares where I was dying again in that studio apartment, where the reversion never came, where I'd somehow miscalculated and the Hayes family kept everything forever. Those days, I had to remind myself, I'd already lived the worst timeline. Anything else was an improvement, and I had advantages they didn't know about. In 2020, the pandemic hit. In my first life, I'd caught COVID early and spent 2 months barely able to breathe, alone in my apartment, with the Hayes family sending me texts about hoping you feel better, while doing absolutely nothing to help. This time, I was prepared. I'd stocked up on masks and supplies in January. I'd already been working from home. The bookstore had pivoted to online sales, and Marcus Chen had put me in charge of the website. And while the world locked down, I did something I'd been planning for years. I started writing again, not under my own name, under a pseudonym, A.M. Winters. The book was called The Last Garden, and it was everything I'd learned in 23 years of living, dying, and living again. It was about a woman who discovers she can travel back to pivotal moments in her life, but she can't change them. She can only understand them differently. It was literary fiction with a speculative edge. Nothing like the Moonstone Chronicles. Nothing that Victoria could claim was derivative. I published it through a small independent press that Marcus Chen recommended. The advance was $3,000. I didn't care. The book came out in August 2020 into a world hungry for stories about second chances and understanding our past. It sold quietly at first, maybe 1,000 copies in the first month. Then it started showing up on book club lists, then a few book bloggers discovered it. Then it got reviewed in the New York Times. A.M. Winters has written something profound and strange, a meditation on regret disguised as a thriller. Unforgettable. By December, it had sold 50,000 copies. By March 2021, it had won the National Book Award. Nobody knew A.M. Winters was Emma Hayes. The author bio was deliberately vague. A.M. Winters lives in the Pacific Northwest and enjoys gardening. The author photo was taken from behind, showing only the back of my head. Jennifer Torres knew. Marcus Chen knew. Kim knew. Nobody else. And when Victoria called me in April 2021, her voice tight with forced cheer, I knew she'd heard about it. Emma, darling, I heard the strangest rumor. Someone said you'd published a book. Oh, I said vaguely. Just a little thing, nothing important. Nothing important? Emma, you can't just publish books without consulting us. What if it interferes with the Moonstone brand? It's nothing like Moonstone. It's literary fiction. I published it under a different name. Nobody even knows I wrote it. Silence. Then, what name? Does it matter? Emma. Her voice went cold. What name? I don't think I have to tell you that, Victoria. It's my work. I own it. I could hear her breathing, sharp and angry. Choi, we need to discuss this. In person. This is completely inappropriate. What's inappropriate about writing a book? You're under contract. No, I'm not. I signed over the rights to the Moonstone Chronicles. I didn't sign away my ability to create new work. Check with your lawyers. Another long silence. Then, sweet as poison. Of course, dear. I just worry about you. You're not thinking clearly. The stress of David's loss. It's been 6 years, Victoria. Grief has no timeline, Emma. I'm just concerned that you're making decisions that could hurt you. Financially, legally. I have my own lawyer now. I heard her sharp intake of breath. I see. Well, I suppose there's nothing more to say. I suppose not. She hung up without saying goodbye. I sat in my apartment, hands shaking, and I realized this was the first time I'd ever stood up to her, in either life. It felt terrifying. It felt incredible. The retaliation came within a week. The Hayes family lawyers sent a cease and desist letter to my publisher, claiming that The Last Garden violated my contract with the Hayes estate. They claimed that any work I produced was fruit of the poison tree, created using creative energy and time that belonged to them. It was bullshit. It was transparent, obvious bullshit. But it was also expensive bullshit to fight. My publisher panicked. They were a small press. They couldn't afford a legal battle with the Hayes family's corporate attorneys. They offered to settle, pull the book, pulp the remaining copies, pretend it had never happened. I said no. Jennifer Torres said, "Are you sure? This is going to cost you everything you've made from the book and probably more." I'm sure. They're going to make this as painful as possible. I know. Emma, why now? You've been so careful. Why pick this fight? I thought about that. In my first life, I'd backed down from every fight. I'd let them bully me, shame me, erase me, and where had it gotten me? Dead and forgotten, while they lived in mansions built on my words. Because, I said slowly, I spent 23 years being afraid, and I died afraid. I don't want to live like that again. Jennifer nodded. Okay, then let's burn their house down. The legal battle lasted 18 months. The Hayes family threw everything at us. Depositions, motions, discovery requests designed to drown us in paperwork. They dragged up every interview I'd ever done, every email I'd ever sent, trying to prove that The Last Garden was somehow derivative of Moonstone. Their star witness was a literary expert who testified that both books featured strong female protagonists and themes of self-discovery. Therefore, they were essentially the same work. Our star witness was a Georgetown law professor who specialized in copyright and who eviscerated their argument in 45 minutes of testimony that went viral on legal Twitter. By the plaintiff's logic, Professor Diane Chen said calmly, every coming-of-age story ever written would be derivative of every other coming-of-age story. This isn't how copyright law works. This isn't how creativity works. This is simply an attempt by a wealthy family to control an artist's entire creative output in perpetuity, which is precisely what the Copyright Act was designed to prevent. In September 2022, the judge ruled in my favor. Completely, decisively, with prejudice. And then he did something unexpected. He ordered the Hayes family to pay my legal fees. All of them, $347,000. Victoria had to write me a check. Personally, I had it framed. The victory should have felt sweet. It did feel sweet, but it also escalated things. Because now the Hayes family knew I wasn't the broken, compliant widow they'd thought I was. I was a threat. Marcus, brother-in-law, not Chen, started showing up at my apartment building, just standing outside, watching. When I confronted him, he claimed he was just in the neighborhood. In a neighborhood he'd once called dangerous and unsuitable. Victoria started a whisper campaign telling people in the publishing industry that I was difficult, unstable, not to be trusted. A few editors I'd reached out to suddenly stopped returning my calls. And David's mother, Helen Hayes, who I'd barely heard from in years, suddenly wanted to have lunch. We met at an expensive restaurant in downtown Seattle. She was 75, impeccably dressed, and she'd been the one who raised David to believe that he was inherently superior to everyone around him. Emma, she said, kissing the air near my cheek, you look thin. I've been busy. Yes, I heard about your legal troubles. Such an unfortunate misunderstanding. It wasn't a misunderstanding. Victoria tried to steal my work. Helen's smile didn't waver. Victoria is passionate about protecting the family legacy. Sometimes passion leads to overzealousness. I'm sure she meant well. She meant to silence me. Did she? Helen took a sip of wine. Or did she simply want to ensure that the Hayes name remained associated with quality? You must understand, Emma, that the Moonstone Chronicles is more than just books. It's a brand, a business. When you signed those rights over to us, you became part of something larger. I didn't sign myself into slavery. Of course not. But you did accept our support, our money, our protection. Surely you can understand why we'd be concerned when you start publishing books behind our backs, using pseudonyms, behaving as if you're not part of this family. I'm not part of your family. David died 7 years ago. And yet you still bear his name. It was true. I'd kept the name Hayes, partially because changing it legally was expensive, partially because it kept me connected to the contracts, and partially because I wanted them to remember that I existed. I'll change it if you prefer, I said. Helen's mask slipped. Just for a second. Don't be dramatic. That's not what I'm saying. I'm simply suggesting that perhaps we've all been operating under some misconceptions. You feel we've treated you unfairly. We feel you've been ungrateful. Perhaps it's time to renegotiate. Renegotiate what? Everything. The monthly payments, your role in the franchise, your independence. My independence isn't negotiable. Everything is negotiable, dear. She leaned forward. Let me be clear. We are prepared to increase your monthly payment to $10,000. We'll publicly acknowledge your authorship of the Moonstone Chronicles. We'll even consult with you on major decisions regarding the franchise. All we ask is that you sign a new agreement stating that any future works you create will be reviewed by our legal team before publication to ensure there are no conflicts of interest. You want to approve everything I write. We want to protect both you and the family from future legal complications. No. Emma, no, I'm not signing anything that gives you control over my future work. I'd rather be poor. Helen's eyes went cold. You might get your wish. Do you know how much it costs to maintain a legal defense against a family with our resources? You won in one case. Congratulations. How many more can you afford to fight? As many as it takes. Pride is expensive, Emma. So is dignity. I'll take pride. I stood up, leaving my overpriced salad untouched. Helen didn't try to stop me. As I walked out, I heard her say, almost too quiet to catch, "You'll regret this." Maybe I would, but I'd regret surrender more. The harassment intensified after that lunch. Someone, I could never prove, who filed a complaint with the IRS claiming I hadn't paid taxes on my book earnings. It took 6 months and another $15,000 in accounting fees to prove I had. Someone, again, no proof, left a 1-star review of The Last Garden on every platform, claiming that A.M. Winters was a fraud who had plagiarized the work from uncredited ghostwriters. The review was detailed enough to seem credible, vague enough to be hard to disprove. Someone hacked my email and sent messages to my publisher claiming I wanted to terminate my contract. I was exhausted. I was scared. I was running out of money faster than I could make it. And then Marcus Chen saved my life. Not literally, but close. He'd been watching everything unfold, getting angrier by the day. Finally, in November 2022, he called me into his office at the bookstore. "I'm selling," he said. "What?" "The bookstore. I'm selling it. I'm 70 years old, Emma. I'm tired, but here's the thing. I'm not selling to just anyone. I'm selling to you. Marcus, I can't afford... I'm selling it to you for $1. I stared at him. "The business is worth about $3,000, he continued. "Property, inventory, client list, everything. But I'm selling it to you for $1. With one condition. You promise to keep it independent. No corporate chains, no selling out. You keep it as a space for real books, real authors, real readers." "Why?" "Because fuck the Hayes family," he said simply. "Because you're a fighter and you deserve a safe harbor. Because I read the Moonstone Chronicles when my daughter was going through chemotherapy, and those books gave her something to hold on to when everything else was falling apart. She died anyway, but she died with hope. And that was because of you, not the Hayes family you." I was crying before he finished. "Marcus, so, do we have a deal?" "Yes, God, yes." We shook hands, and I became a small business owner. The bookstore gave me stability, income, a base of operations. It also gave me something I hadn't had before, a community. The regular customers became my army. They'd grown up with Moonstone. They'd discovered it through Melissa Thorne's tweet. They loved The Last Garden. And when they learned, slowly, carefully, through conversations and trust, that Emma Hayes and A.M. Winters were the same person, and what the Hayes family had done to me, they became fierce. One customer, a lawyer named Rachel, started a pro bono legal clinic out of the bookstore's back room, helping artists who were being exploited by contracts they didn't understand. Another, a programmer named Dev, built me a website where I could sell signed copies of The Last Garden directly, keeping 100% of the profits instead of the usual 10% author royalty. Another, a journalist named Patricia, started investigating the Hayes family's business practices and discovered that I wasn't their only victim. They'd been acquiring rights to books from desperate authors for decades, offering family trust arrangements that were essentially legalized theft. Patricia published her investigation in The Atlantic in March 2023. The headline: The Hayes Family Literary Empire, How One Family Built a Fortune on Stolen Dreams. It went nuclear. Suddenly everyone was talking about it. Authors' organizations condemned the Hayes family. Publishers quietly distanced themselves. The hashtag #HayesExposed trended for a week, and Victoria called me, her voice shaking with rage. "You did this. You gave that journalist our private information." "I didn't have to. Your victims were eager to talk. We'll sue her, we'll sue you, we'll sue everyone." "Good luck with that. Truth is a defense against libel." "You vindictive bitch. After everything we've done for you? You've done nothing for me except steal my work and make me feel like I should be grateful for it. That ends now." "You think you've won? You think this changes anything? We still own Moonstone. We still control the franchise. You're nothing without us." "I'm not nothing. I'm the author. And in 24 years, I'm going to be the owner too." Silence. Then, "What?" "Copyright reversion. Look it up." I hung up before she could respond. 3 days later, their lawyers must have explained it to them, because I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. It was Helen Hayes. "We need to talk," she said. No pleasantries this time. "In person, name the place." "My bookstore, tomorrow, noon." Fine. She showed up with Marcus, the brother-in-law, and Victoria, and the three of them looked like they hadn't slept in days. "You can't do this," Victoria said immediately. "The reversion, it's not automatic. You'd have to file. We could fight it." "You could," Jennifer Torres said. She'd joined us for the meeting along with Rachel the lawyer and Patricia the journalist. "But you'd lose. The statute is very clear. And given the current public sentiment about your business practices, do you really want to spend the next 2 decades fighting Emma Hayes in court? How do you think that would look?" Helen Hayes stared at me with something like hatred. "What do you want? Nothing from you? I want you to leave me alone. Stop the harassment. Stop the legal games. Stop trying to control my life. I'll continue to stay quiet about my authorship of Moonstone until the rights revert. You can keep making money off it for the next 24 years. But when 2047 comes, I get everything, and we never speak again." "And if we refuse?" "Then I go public right now. I do interviews, I write op-eds, I explain to the world exactly who created the Moonstone Chronicles and what you did to me. I make it my life's mission to ensure that every person who reads those books knows that the Hayes family are thieves and exploiters. How long do you think your empire lasts then?" Marcus, brother-in-law, ran his hands through his hair. "This is insane. You're talking about 2 decades of detente. How do we know you won't go public anyway?" "You don't. You'll have to trust me." "Trust you? After you've spent years plotting against us?" "I wasn't plotting. I was surviving. There's a difference." Helen stood up slowly. "You've become hard, Emma. I almost respect it." "I don't need your respect. I need your absence." She nodded once. "Very well. We'll leave you alone. But understand this. In 27, we will fight the reversion with everything we have. We'll find loopholes. We'll challenge the statute. We'll make it as difficult as possible." I'd expect nothing less. They left, and I collapsed into a chair shaking. "You okay?" Jennifer asked. "I just bought myself 24 years of peace. Yeah, I'm okay." Rachel grinned. "You know what's amazing? In 24 years, you'll be 52. You'll have spent half your life building toward this moment, and they have no idea what's coming." But I did. I knew exactly what was coming. The years between 2023 and 2047 were strange. The Hayes family kept their word, mostly. They stopped the overt harassment. No more threatening letters, no more IRS complaints, no more mysterious 1-star reviews. But they couldn't help themselves completely. Every few years, they'd do something petty. They'd schedule a Moonstone Chronicles event on the same day as one of my book signings. They'd give interviews talking about the Hayes literary legacy without mentioning my name. They'd make sure I knew they were still there, still watching, still waiting. I didn't care. I was building my own empire. The Last Garden had been nominated for the Pulitzer. It didn't win, but the nomination was enough. A.M. Winters became a respected name in literary fiction. I published 3 more novels over the next 15 years. Each one different, each one critically acclaimed, each one proving that I was more than just the woman who wrote Moonstone. The bookstore became a Seattle landmark. We hosted author events, writing workshops, book clubs. We became a community hub. I hired staff who shared my values, people who'd been marginalized, exploited, overlooked. We created a space where everyone belonged. I also became a mentor. Young writers would find me asking for advice on contracts, on dealing with publishers, on protecting their work. I told them the truth. The industry is full of people who will try to take advantage of you. Read everything. Trust no one. Keep your own records. And I watched the Moonstone Chronicles franchise continue to grow. The 12-hour resurgence I'd predicted happened exactly as I remembered. Fantasy Explained's YouTube videos went viral, bringing in millions of new readers. The Streamflix adaptation launched in 2027 to mixed reviews, but massive viewership. Victoria appeared on talk shows, glowing and gracious, accepting praise for shepherding the franchise. The deepfake scandal hit in 2031, just as I'd known it would. Some fans used AI to create pornographic videos of the actors. Streamflix panicked and canceled the show. The Hayes family sued, won, and sold the rights to Nexus Films for twice what Streamflix had paid. Through it all, I said nothing. I was a ghost in my own story. Kim asked me, during one of our sessions in 2035, if I ever regretted it. You could be famous, you could be wealthy. You're letting them have all of that. For now, I said. But fame and wealth on their terms means nothing. In 12 years, I'll have it on mine. You're very patient. I died once already. What's 12 more years? In 2038, the year I died in my first life, I threw myself a party. Just me, Jennifer, Marcus Chen's children, who'd become like family, the bookstore staff, and a few close friends. What are we celebrating? Someone asked. Survival, I said. I'm 51 years old, and I'm still here. That's worth celebrating. We drank champagne and ate cake, and I thought about the other Emma, the one who'd died alone, bitter and broken. I toasted her memory, and I promised her, this time will be different. 9 years to go. In 2045, 2 years before the reversion, the Hayes family made their move. They'd been quiet for so long that I'd almost let my guard down. Then I got a call from Jennifer. Emma, we have a problem. My stomach dropped. What kind of problem? The Hayes family is claiming that David was a co-author of the Moonstone Chronicles. That's insane. He never wrote a word. I know, but they've produced documents, emails between you and David where you discussed the books, notes he allegedly made on early drafts. They're claiming he was a creative collaborator, and therefore his estate, meaning his family, has a legitimate claim to the copyright that supersedes the reversion statute. I felt cold all over. Can they do that? I don't know, it's novel legal theory, but they have resources and they have time. Even if they ultimately lose, they could tie this up in court for years, decades. I have evidence. I have early drafts with timestamps, revision histories, everything that proves I wrote the books alone. Do you have evidence from before you met David? I met David when I was 22. I started writing Moonstone when I was 19. Can you prove that? Could I? I spent 3 weeks going through storage units, old hard drives, everything I'd saved from my first life and this one. I found notebooks from college with early world building. I found an ancient laptop with dated files. I found a writing workshop submission from 2010, 6 months before I met David, with the first 3 chapters of what would become the Moonstone Chronicles. Jennifer wept when I showed her. This is it. This proves everything. Will it be enough? It has to be. The case went to trial in January 2047, 6 months before the reversion date. The Hayes family's lawyers presented their evidence, emails where I'd asked David for feedback, notes he'd made saying things like, love this chapter, and the dragon scene needs work, even a recording of him at a party saying, my wife and I are working on something special. Their argument was that this constituted creative collaboration under copyright law. Our counter-argument was simple. Feedback is not authorship. Every writer gets feedback. It doesn't make the feedback giver a co-author. We presented my evidence, the college notebooks, the dated files, the workshop submission. We called professors who remembered me working on the book before I'd ever met David. We showed my Google Docs revision history, proving that every single word had been typed by my account. We called a forensic linguist who analyzed David's writing style, pulled from his emails, his college papers, his work reports, and compared it to the Moonstone Chronicles. The conclusion? Zero overlap. If David had written even portions of the books, his distinctive style markers would appear. They didn't. The trial lasted 6 weeks. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. They ruled in my favor, unanimously. The judge, a woman in her 60s who admitted she'd read Moonstone with her daughter, added a statement for the record. The court finds that the plaintiff's attempt to claim authorship through the thinnest possible interpretation of collaboration is not only legally baseless, but morally reprehensible. Mrs. Hayes created these works alone. Her late husband provided what any supportive partner might provide: encouragement and minor feedback. This does not constitute co-authorship. The court further finds that the Hayes family's decades-long exploitation of Mrs. Hayes and her work represents a pattern of behavior that should serve as a warning to creative professionals everywhere. Protect your work, protect your rights, and never assume that family will treat you fairly. I sat in the courtroom listening to those words, and I felt something break open in my chest. Vindication, validation, victory. Outside, the press was waiting. I'd avoided them for decades, but now I stood on the courthouse steps and I made a statement. My name is Emma Hayes. I am the sole author of the Moonstone Chronicles. For 35 years, the Hayes family has profited from my work while erasing me from the story. In 6 months, the copyright will revert to me under federal law, and I will finally have control over the books I created. I want every artist, every writer, every creator to know your work is yours. No matter what contracts you sign, no matter what you're told, your creative labor has value and you have rights. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise. Thank you. I didn't take questions. I just walked away, Jennifer at my side, and I went back to my bookstore. The Hayes family appealed. Of course they did. The appeal was denied. They filed for emergency injunctions. Denied. They tried to argue that the publicity from the trial had prejudiced my right to a fair reversion process. Denied. And on July 15, 2007, exactly 35 years after the publication of the first Moonstone Chronicles book, I filed my termination notice with the Copyright Office. The rights reverted to me. All of them. Every book, every adaptation, every piece of merchandise, every licensing deal, everything. The Hayes family had 60 days to settle existing contracts and obligations. The Nexus Films adaptation was in production for season 5. I had the right to cancel it. I didn't. Instead, I renegotiated. The Hayes family had been getting 80% of the profits, with the studio keeping 20%. I flipped it. I took 80%, Nexus Films kept 20%, and I hired the showrunner directly, giving her creative freedom the Hayes family had never allowed. The show got better. The ratings soared, the merchandise deals, the t-shirts, the posters, the replica weapons, the themed jewelry, all those contracts had been negotiated by Victoria with massive percentages going to the Hayes family. I terminated them all and renegotiated with companies that had better labor practices and gave fair wages to their workers. I took a smaller percentage, but made sure the people actually making the products were treated well. The book sales still flowed, and now they flowed to me. The first royalty check I received as the full rights holder was for $8.7 million for 1 quarter. I took half of it and set up a foundation, the Emma Hayes Fund for Exploited Artists. We provided legal assistance, contract review, and financial support for creators who were being taken advantage of by publishers, producers, family members, or anyone else who thought they could steal someone's work. Jennifer ran it, Rachel volunteered, Patricia served on the board. We helped hundreds of people in the first year alone. I took another chunk of the money and expanded the bookstore into a chain. Not a corporate chain, but a collective. Each store was independently owned by someone from the community, someone who loved books, someone who needed a chance. I provided the initial capital. They ran their stores however they wanted. Within 3 years, we had 15 locations across the country. And I kept writing. A.M. Winters published a memoir in 2049, After the Reversion. It told the whole story: the marriage, the death, the theft, the long wait, the victory. It became a bestseller. Emma Hayes, under her own name, published a new fantasy series in 2050, The Shadowmere Saga. It was different from Moonstone, darker, more complex, informed by everything I'd learned and survived. It debuted at #1 on the New York Times bestseller list. The reviews said things like, Hayes has returned and she's better than ever. Better than ever. I was 58 years old. I heard through intermediaries that Victoria had a breakdown after the reversion. She'd built her entire identity around being the guardian of the Hayes literary empire. Without it, she didn't know who she was. Marcus, brother-in-law, had to liquidate his venture capital firm to cover debts. Turned out most of his successful investments had been funded by Moonstone money. Without that cash flow, everything collapsed. Helen Hayes died in 2049, a year before she would have seen the new Moonstone adaptation become the highest-rated fantasy series in streaming history. I didn't go to the funeral. I did send flowers. The card said, "Thank you for teaching me what not to become." David's siblings, the ones who'd barely known me, who'd gone along with Victoria's schemes because it was easier than standing up to her, sent me apology letters. Too little, too late. I didn't respond. But David's cousin, a woman named Sarah who'd always been kind to me, reached out personally. "I didn't know," she said when we met for coffee. "I didn't know what they were doing to you. I was young, and I believed the family narrative. I'm sorry." "It's not your fault." "It kind of is. I could have asked questions. I could have cared enough to look beyond the surface. But I didn't, because it was easier not to." I appreciated her honesty. We didn't become friends, exactly, but we maintained a cordial relationship. She was a teacher, and she started using the Moonstone Chronicles in her classroom, making sure her students knew the real story behind the books. Small redemptions. They mattered. In 25, I was 63 years old. The Moonstone Chronicles franchise was worth an estimated $2.3 billion. I'd written 8 more books under my own name, plus 5 under A.M. Winters. The Emma Hayes Fund had helped over 3,000 artists protect their work. The bookstore collective had grown to 40 locations. I'd been interviewed by everyone from NPR to Oprah's successor to podcasts I'd never heard of. I'd been offered movie deals for my own life story. I'd turned them all down. Some stories were mine alone. And I was tired. Not the desperate, hopeless exhaustion of my first life, but the bone-deep weariness of someone who'd been fighting for 40 years and had finally earned the right to rest. I decided to retire. I sold the Moonstone Chronicles rights, not to a corporation, but to a collective of artists and writers who promised to steward the work ethically. I retained creative approval and a percentage of profits, but I handed over the day-to-day control. I kept writing, but at my own pace, a book every few years when the story demanded it. I traveled. I'd spent so much of my life in survival mode that I'd never seen the world. I went to New Zealand, to Japan, to Portugal, to Iceland. I wrote postcards to the bookstore staff and the fund administrators and everyone who'd helped me along the way. And I went back to the cemetery where David was buried. I hadn't been there since the funeral in either timeline. I stood at his grave, looking at the headstone that said, "Beloved son and husband," and I felt nothing. No anger, no grief, no lingering attachment. He'd been a mediocre man who treated me badly, and then he died. And his family had tried to destroy me in his name, but I'd survived, I'd won, and now I was free. "I forgive you," I said to the headstone, not because he deserved it, but because I deserved peace. "I forgive all of you." Then I walked away and never looked back. I'm 70 years old now. It's 2062, 15 years after the reversion. I'm writing this from my house on an island in the Pacific Northwest, a house I bought with my own money, filled with my own books, surrounded by my own garden. Sometimes people ask me if I regret the way I handled things, if I wish I'd fought back sooner, if I wish I'd exposed the Hayes family earlier, if I wish I'd never signed that first contract. I tell them, I don't traffic in regrets. I made the choices I could make with the information I had. In my first life, I didn't know what was possible. In my second life, I learned some people call me a hero. I'm not. I'm just someone who refused to stay a victim. Some people call the Hayes family villains. They weren't. Not really. They were ordinary people who saw an opportunity to profit from someone else's work, and they took it. They told themselves they deserved it, that they were protecting family, that they were doing the right thing. They were wrong, but they believed their own story. The real villain was a system that made exploitation easy and resistance hard. A system that assumed artists didn't deserve to profit from their own work. A system that privileged wealth and connections over creativity and labor. I didn't destroy that system, but I made a dent in it. And maybe that's enough. Last week, I got a letter from a young writer. She'd read After the Reversion and wanted to thank me. She said she'd been about to sign away the rights to her debut novel to a publisher who promised to take care of everything. After os, reading my story, she hired a lawyer, read the contract carefully, and negotiated better terms. "You saved my career," she wrote. "Maybe my life." I cried when I read that. Not from sadness, from joy. Because this is what victory looks like. Not just winning your own battle, but making the next battle easier for someone else. I'm writing a new book now. It's not fantasy, not literary fiction. It's somewhere in between. A story about a woman who gets a second chance at life and has to decide who she wants to become. I don't know how it ends yet. But I know she survives. She wins. She's free. And that, after everything, is enough. The rights to the Moonstone Chronicles remain mine. The franchise continues to grow, spawning new adaptations, new merchandise, new generations of readers who find solace and strength in stories about surviving darkness. I receive royalty checks 4 times a year. I donate most of it to the fund, to the bookstore collective, to causes that help people who are where I once was. I keep enough to live comfortably, but not extravagantly. I don't need mansions or designer clothes or champagne towers. I need books. I need my garden. I need the satisfaction of knowing that I took back what was mine and used it to help others. Last month, I got an email from someone claiming to be Victoria's daughter, David's niece. She said her mother had never recovered from losing the empire, that she'd spent the last years of her life bitter and angry, insisting that I'd stolen from the family. "She died last week," the email said. "I thought you should know, and I wanted to apologize for everything she put you through. You deserved better." I wrote back, "Thank you for telling me. I'm sorry for your loss. I hope you find peace." And I meant it, because the best revenge isn't making your enemies suffer. It's building a life so good that their suffering becomes irrelevant. The copyright to the Moonstone Chronicles doesn't expire for another 70 years. Long after I'm dead, those rights will pass to whoever I choose to leave them to. I'm still deciding. Maybe the fund, maybe the collective, maybe some organization that doesn't exist yet. Whoever inherits them, I'll make sure the contract is airtight. I'll make sure no one can do to my legacy what the Hayes family tried to do to my work. I'll protect future generations the way I wish someone had protected me. And when I die, hopefully many years from now, peacefully in my sleep, I'll die knowing that I won. Not just the legal battle, not just the rights reversion. I won my life back. I won my voice back. I won myself back. And in the end, that's the only victory that really matters. Sometimes, late at night, I think about the moment I woke up at 28 with 23 years of memories burning in my mind. I think about how terrifying it was, how disorienting, how I spent weeks convinced I was losing my mind. I think about the temptation to do things differently, to save David, to avoid the Hayes family entirely, to run away and start over somewhere they'd never find me. But I didn't do any of that. I stayed. I endured. I waited. Because the only way to truly win was to take back exactly what they'd stolen, on exactly the terms the law allowed. Anything else would have been less than I deserved. People sometimes ask if I believe in fate, in destiny, in some cosmic reason why I was given a second chance. I don't know. What I do know is this. I was given time. I was given knowledge. And I chose to use both to become someone who could survive, could fight, could win. The rebirth was a gift. What I did with it was a choice. And I chose to reclaim everything they took from me. And then I chose to use it to help others reclaim their own stolen dreams. That's not fate. That's just being human. Being stubborn, being strong, being free. The contract I signed in 2015, handing over my royalty rights to the Hayes family, sits framed in my office. Next to it, the document from 2047 that returned those rights to me. Looking at them together, you can see the whole story. The exploitation and the liberation, the theft and the recovery, the ending they wanted and the ending I created. The copyright had expired and reverted to me, and I had all the time in the world to make it mean something. I still have that time. I'm still making it mean something. And I'll keep doing so until the day I die. This time on my own terms. This time with my name on everything I create. This time free. Finally, impossibly triumphantly free.